I once inherited an accounting course so boring, I literally fell asleep trying to fix it. One day, my learning manager approached me with an accounting course where enrollment numbers had started dropping, and there just didn't seem to be the same excitement around the program anymore. At first, she thought the course might just need a few updates. So I started doing my research. I looked through student feedback, course evaluations, and learner responses. But interestingly, most of the feedback was positive, especially for one of the subject matter experts. The other one wasn't mentioned at all, so I asked if I could sit in on one of her classes. She agreed, but that's when I discovered the real problem. The class was almost entirely lecture-based. Slide after slide, formula after formula. About 20 minutes in, I noticed students starting to fade. One stopped taking notes, another stared blankly at the wall, a few were physically fighting to stay awake. And honestly, at one point I caught myself nodding off too. I remember feeling embarrassed for a second, until I realized the facilitator never even noticed. She was completely locked into the lecture, focused on covering content, not reading the room. I thought I'd take a gentle approach in our first kickoff meeting with the two subject matter experts and facilitators. Maybe suggest diversifying the course a little, adding videos, peer discussions, case studies, maybe even a little gamification, without directly saying the course could cure insomnia. But during that first meeting, the more traditional facilitator was clearly reluctant to major changes. In fact, the more I pushed ideas around learner engagement and interaction, the more resistance I seemed to get back. She had already heard from our learning manager that the course needed updating, but in her mind, the solution was mostly visual. Updating a few presentation colors, refreshing the slides. Meanwhile, the other facilitator was quietly trying to advocate for more participation and discussion-based learning, but she could barely get a word in. After the meeting, the other subject matter expert called me privately. She sounded frustrated, honestly close to tears. She knew the course needed to evolve. She had tried suggesting more discussions, more interaction, more participation, but every time she brought up new ideas, they were quickly shut down. At one point, she told me her ideas had been dismissed as silly. And that's when I started realizing this wasn't just a course redesign problem, this was a trust problem. So I decided to meet with the more traditional facilitator one-on-one. At that time, I genuinely thought I could help her see what a great learning experience could look like. I came prepared. I built out a checklist based on Gagné's 9 events of instruction and started identifying all the things the course was missing, like learner engagement, participation, interaction, feedback, application. I thought if I could just explain the gaps, everything would click. But that meeting was about to completely blow up in my face. Subject matter expert, she wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. I still remember her looking at me and saying, "I'm the subject matter expert, I have the final say here." And basically, my role was to help edit the PowerPoints and stay in my lane. So there I was, sitting across from someone I was trying to help, realizing my entire approach had completely failed. I thought if I just explained the missing learning principles clearly enough, everything would click. Instead, I had accidentally made her feel criticized. I knew I had to pivot because this wasn't a learning theory problem anymore. It was a people problem. And that's when I remembered something my instructional design mentor taught me. When you're dealing with difficult stakeholders or subject matter experts, empathy matters more than expertise. So I gave it a few days, then I asked to meet again. But this time I took a completely different approach. Instead of pointing out what was wrong with the course, I tried to show her I was on her side. I acknowledged how much work she had put into building the program, and honestly, she should have been proud of that. The course did contain valuable information, so instead of criticizing it, I asked her a simple question. If you had to rate the course out of 10, what would you give it? She paused for a second and said, "Probably an 8, and I said, "Okay, an 8. So what do you think you could help to bring it to a 10? And that's when everything changed. She started opening up. She said, "Well, maybe we could try some of those ideas you mentioned before, maybe add some videos, maybe some scenarios." And I also think the other facilitator even had an idea for a matching game students could play to reinforce learning. Suddenly, the conversation completely shifted. It stopped being, "Why are you criticizing my course?" and became, "How do we make this course even better together?" From there, the course slowly started evolving. We added more learner interactions, scenario-based discussions, activities, reinforcement exercises, moments where students actually had to participate instead of just absorb information. And within about 3 months, something incredible happened. Enrollment started climbing again. What had dropped down to just a handful of students suddenly grew so quickly, we had to open up additional course sections because the original classes had already hit the 40 student limit. My favorite part wasn't even the enrollment growth. It was that both facilitators started receiving positive learner feedback. Students felt more engaged. The classroom felt more alive the next time I dropped in. and the two subject matter experts who had once struggled to collaborate were finally building something together. What I learned from that experience is that instructional design isn't really about slides or software or proving you're the smartest person in the room. Sometimes the real work is helping people feel heard long enough to build something better together. So what did you think? If you've had a similar experience, let us know about it in the comments section.